All right, we are back with another Tossing Salad episode. I am Brian Sirimaturos, your host. This week, we are diving deep into Star Wars. I am going to be sitting down with Chelsea Gardenside, another garden friend from our Instagram family within the garden community. And interesting enough, Chelsea and I, this is going to be the first time that we've actually spent time in talking to each other. And I'll tell you why this took so long to edit and get out is because I started with a 3-hour file. Basically, we were on line with each other for 3 hours, of which about an hour and 45 minutes, close to 2 hours, was Star Wars related. And then the other hour or so was just us conversing. And Chelsea, where have you been? We should have been friends earlier. So anyways, had a lot of fun. The interesting thing here is I am coming from the era of Star Wars. I was born in 1975. So obviously the original trilogy, they're my movies, right? Everything else is compared to them. Chelsea, 90s girl, prequel era, I would say. So it'll be interesting to see how we get along in this Star Wars fight. Well, I shouldn't say Star Wars fight. It's not a fight. You just have to listen to it. Chelsea, not only is she a garden expert, she's a genocide expert. I was like, you know what? I have to find somebody to sit down and talk Star Wars that not only is garden related, because all of these interviews have been garden related, garden people that we're pulling out to get to know them a little better, talking things outside of growing a tomato. But I also wanted a genocide expert. I'm not kidding. Just listen to the podcast. All right, so we're going to drop you in right in our conversation. Star Wars, we're ranking all of the theatrical release movies. So that's basically 1 through 9, Solo, and Rogue One. But anyway, well, I'm ready to start the Star Wars, the definitive Star Wars podcast between two gardeners who have never really talked to each other than tonight for the first time, which is kind of funny.
It's so true. Our blind date. Our blind Star Wars date.
I've got Chelsea here. Garden said, is that how you say?
Side.
Garden side.
I know. It's just spelled differently. But yeah, it's side, like S-I-D.
I'm getting on to all my friends with their accounts that are just so hard. I'm like, how do you say it?
That's my name. That's my real name.
Side?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's okay. Well, that makes I get it. It's still it's still hard.
Pick a different name. So my first name was Wagenbrenner, and I got married. So you're welcome. This is an easier name.
Wagenbrenner? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that one either.
Yes, I did make it easier for people, but it's not phonetic. So.
Oh my God. Well, we're here tonight to discuss. I am at a crossroads with something here that has been part of my life for I'm 47. Jeez. Now I'm just counting down to where everything is just going to be done for. But Star Wars has been a huge part of my life ever since growing up. I was born in 1975. Obviously, 5 years after that, Star Wars phenomenon hits globally. And I'm out there. I've got all the toys. And Star Wars was a huge part of little Brian growing up, toy-wise, movie-wise. And then you fast forward 20 years later, and lo and behold, we get a whole bunch of new movies, and everybody gets excited. A whole nother generation of younger kids get involved with Star Wars. And I'm here now, 2022. And Chelsea, I will tell you, this is the first time that I am not quite excited about Star Wars and where it's going. The Disney Plus, the new show on here, Andor.
Wait, no spoilers. I haven't seen the very last episode. I was
going to
try to watch it.
I'm not going to spoil anything.
Okay.
But this is the first time that it wasn't an event in our house. Everything
Ooh.
leading up to Andor has been an event in our house. Obi-Wan Kenobi, episodes 7, 8, and 9. Oh my God, the countdown, a few months away. I'm watching things on YouTube. This is the first time to where we got into, I think it was like episode 8 or 9. And one night at the dinner table, the family, it's just me, my wife, my 2 teenage boys. We're like, should we be watching Andor? I guess. I don't know. So I want to hear from you. So can I ask you when you were born or when? Because I think it's important to try to find out.
Yeah, you can ask me anything you want. It's fine. I was born in 1990.
1990. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you are the next generation that grew up with the episodes 1, 2, and 3. So I want to know from you, Chelsea, where does Star Wars stand with you, your family, and has all of the good Star Wars, is that behind us? And we're just going to kind of, as we go forward, it's just going to kind of fizzle out. Can it fizzle out? Where are we at with Star Wars in your opinion?
I was really curious, like, is there going to be debate here? Like, are we going to disagree? Our lists weren't that off. Like, I was a little worried. And once you just spoke, I don't know if you could see me getting visually very excited because I was like, oh, this is great. It's going to be a great debate. Okay, so Star Wars for me, my dad was like a huge fanatic. And when we were too young to appreciate the first 3 that were ever made, so 4, 5, 6, we were too young to appreciate it. He made us watch them in a hysterical way. I can't even remember how old we were. We were definitely too young to appreciate it appropriately. And he sat us down, he had us watch the episode, and then he had us watch the director's commentary about the episode.
You guys had to have been bored to death.
And we were way too young, but the experience, like seeing how much my dad loved it and how important it was for it, like he set the stage. Like this was an important night. We all needed to pay attention. So like I remember, and I have so much emotional connection to that whole thing, even though I also remember being annoyed, but we didn't leave. Like I definitely remember watching the whole thing and not falling asleep. And it was probably 6 hours.
Do you remember, was this in preparation for episodes 1, 2, and 3? Like, okay, my girls are going to be before 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. So that episode 1 was what, 99?
Yeah, so before that, so we were probably like 4 or 5 when we started watching it with him for the first time. It was before that we knew there was a 1, 2, 3 coming, and he made us watch them, and he made us watch each episode a week apart because he waited, was it a year or 3 years in between the first releases? Do you remember?
The first release is like for A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Yeah. So that was 79, 81, and 83. Okay. So 2 years.
Yes. So he made us wait a week. And then the whole week, he was like, I had to wait 2 years to see what happened between these movies. And we're like, we don't care that much, but fine, you're making us wait a week. Because he was trying to really like simulate this like groundbreaking thing for him as a child or as a teenager for us to then experience. Then after that, we rewatched them all 3 again before 1, 2, and 3 came out and got to see those in the theaters. So I will say I struggled deeply. And with how I ranked 1, I struggled deeply because it was the first time I got to see them in the theaters. And I understand, but like ranking the original saga for me, and you know this, I was chatting you this because I was like, don't make me rank them. Because it's hard. There's like a nostalgia that comes. And honestly, with where I placed 1, I think is largely based on what I know from other people talking about it. That was the first Star Wars I got to see in theaters with my dad after he tried to brainwash us about these being important. Okay, and so I have this emotional connection with that movie, even though I know it's not the best.
I want to hear what you thought with the initial viewing of 4, 5, and 6 before you guys went to go see 1, 2, and 3. I have to think that because they were a little bit older, the videos or the movies and the special effects were a little dated. You couldn't, was it interesting for you?
Oh yeah, it wasn't that. I don't feel like it was that dated for us at that time, to be honest. But it was 94, 95. It wasn't incredibly dated.
Was it magical for you?
I mean, the way that my dad did it was magical, right? Like I could see another kid just haphazardly watching it and it being a miss. But he really painted this whole scene about how special and how exciting. The director's commentary I hated. Like I
Yeah, I
distinctly
mean,
remember being like, this is the worst. He made me do a similar thing with Lord of the Rings. Actually, that was my cousin. So like apparently this is a theme in my life that people make me watch this fantasy with director's commentary. Um, but no, I mean we're totally obsessed. I love it. And then we went to see every movie as a family. So that was like a really big thing for us. And so with one, two, three, that was very, very special. And then when seven, eight, nine came out, again, there was this nostalgia of like, oh my God, we get to relive this together as a family. And I have a baby brother who is a gift from God, who was born 12 years after me.
mhm.
And so he got to go with us to see the last three. And that was really, really cool. And we, of course, saw the extras. So I would say overall, the like nostalgia of the saga and then seeing it go through generations just makes it special. The extra piece I would add, I disagree with you entirely about the
Yeah,
direction it's
tell
going.
me.
Taking, and I guess it's only for fans, I don't know, but taking the world that I love so much and the universe that I find so interesting and compelling and applying it to different formats and different lengths and different like artistry, I've been obsessed. Like it sounds like you probably liked Mandalorian, like I was floored, but even Andor, which I've been more hit or miss on. I watched the first three episodes while working and actually had to rewatch. I forced myself to rewatch them because I barely listened, like it didn't compel me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to rewatch them without working and actually focus. And I forced myself to do it. And they're doing cool, different things. Like the whole episode where they build the team,
Hmm.
that is like stages of team development 101. Like they're taking just like interesting storylines. Like it's no longer black and white, good and evil. And that's why I hated the last three. It is complex and it's gray. And they're like taking basic societal structures and putting them in the Star Wars universe. And we're having a debate about them in a way that they've never been that complex before. Is it more boring than the other movies? Yeah, because there's not really a war in the stars. Some of the episodes are just building a team in a crisis moment. But I thought that was smart. Like I was like, some writer is writing really smart, interesting content. Finally, it's not like good and bad, good versus evil.
The general consensus absolutely agrees with you in a sense that the general consensus of people that have issues with the every Star Wars movie other than the original trilogy, whether it's the toxic fandom or whatever you want to call it, have all pretty much said the same thing, that Andor is kind of a grown-up Star Wars that we've all been wanting.
Mm.
And I've heard that and I'm like, that's awesome, that's great. Why am I on my phone while I'm watching Andor? Because I am kind of bored. I was like,
What
there's something
what
not
bores you?
right here, even though it's adult and a little more complex, and it's not
Mhm.
the war among the stars. I get that, I appreciate that, and I don't disagree with what you just said. It's still, I'm bored with it.
Can you pinpoint it though? Like, we actually, what are moments that have captured you in it, if any?
The only thing that captured me, I can't say because you haven't seen the last, I think,
Oh,
couple
sorry.
episodes or whatever. So I don't want to
Sorry.
spoil that for you. But there's no doubt that every there's every Star Wars movie, and in this particular podcast, Chelsea and I are going to go through and rank them from best to worst, all the theatrical released movies. So all 9 movies plus Solo and Rogue One. I can come up with things I love about every single movie. And I think just from talking with you prior to our podcast officially starting, I think we would appreciate a lot of the same things within Star Wars. I am kind of curious to see what these rankings of ours, because the original trilogy for me those are my movies. 4, 5, and 6 are my movies. And then 1, 2, and 3, we'll get into that. 7, 8, 9 was the redemption. Like, here we go. JJ, save us. In JJ, we trust. And we'll talk about that. But 4, 5, and 6, bias, whatever, those are my movies. Are 1, 2, and 3 your movies, or do you collectively see all of them as your movies, your Star Wars? Do you
I
gravitate towards 1, 2,
I
3?
see four, five, and six. No, and you can see in my rank, four, five, and six are my 100% feel like mine. That feels like Star Wars. And then the rest, I can appreciate 1, 2, and 3 more than the last three, just in nostalgia purposes, because I think they contribute more to 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's my dad. It's what he imparted upon us. So it
And your
was
younger
very
brother, what
hard.
would you think with him? Is 7, 8,
God, he
9
broke
his
my
movies?
heart. He hated them.
7, 8,
It was
9 he hated?
so, yes. He never, it's funny. If kids 12 years apart, they have a very different experience. And I don't think me or my sister realized the extent to which he was not indoctrinated the way we were. And he just didn't have the connection. And I do think a big piece of it is the emotional connection to the series and to the world and to the universe. I still don't think 4, 5, and 6 have bad, they look that old. Like, I don't
So
think
you're
they have bad
saying, but you're saying
effects.
your brother doesn't have a connection to 7, 8, and 9, or he doesn't have a connection to the Star Wars as a whole like you do and I do?
We walked out of 7 and we were just, every single one of us, the second the movie ends, Liam, like, what did you think? Like, this is your first time seeing it in theaters with us. Like, oh my God, what's your reaction? And he was like, it's okay. Like, what?
Is he like an Avengers guy or something? Is that more his?
Him and I like most of the same content in TV. Like, we like fantasy and The Office, and you pick. So normally we're pretty aligned.
Right.
I don't think he had the sit down and forced to watch this in this way. And like, my dad really did a good job, like sharing what I think his experience was. See, I relate to those movies because I feel like I was with him and he painted the entire narrative and he never got that experience, right? He watched them, but he never got my dad being like, this is a life-changing experience. Like, this changed cinema. Like, you were about to see something miraculous.
But if it wasn't for your dad to spend that much time doing it, see, that's why I'm thinking, and that's why I'm saying I can see Star Wars kind of fading out. And I know that's blasphemous to kind of say, but I don't think it really holds for the younger generation.
Yeah.
To get attached to it, like not, I had my situation was slightly different, or a lot different than yours because I grew up with the toys. The 80s were just the toy era to where you're playing with Star Wars, G.I. Joe, He-Man, everything was toy related for marketing. And so there was a little more of a connection to the movies and the toys and everything. You guys come around in the 90s. I think it's just kind of different. And then the kids, 2000s, 2010s, and so on, I don't see them getting attached to Star Wars as we did. And I that's why I asked you initially, do you see, is the best of Star Wars behind us? And we're just going to kind of fade out as we go away from the Skywalker
right?
storylines.
The best is the problem. Like, to me, I think the best of Star Wars is in front of me. But if we're quantifying best based on mass popular opinion, I see what you're saying. If we're quantifying best based on we're getting like nuanced and complex and like they're getting dirty with it and it's not this clean black and white good and evil, I think the best is in front of us. I think they're fine. That was my problem with the storyline of the movies, is there was just such like good versus evil, good versus evil. Now I'm good again. It's like,
so I take it from you then you are somewhat positive about the Mickey gloves on the Star Wars franchise. Like, you think that's a good thing for Lucas to have sold it off and to give it a different investment, a different kind of creative breath to just get it away from him and see what Disney can do with it. So I agree.
yeah.
There's a lot of different things that have come out that we wouldn't have gotten with Lucas.
No, I wasn't positive about it. I didn't have the toy experience you had, right? So I don't think about it that way. So initially when they came out with the last three movies and they also came out with the droids and they also came out with all the things at once, I was like, oh, this is disgusting. Like, this is just like this corporation trying to make money. Like, what happened to the art of it? So I was not positive, but hearing you say part of it being so real for you was the toys and everything, that actually makes me more, I'm impressed with Disney. I'm like, Disney's dark and I don't like it.
I'm surprised, especially with Andor, especially with Rogue One.
Yeah.
I was very surprised with how they took Rogue One with that movie. And so before we start getting into some of the details of some of the movies, why don't we go through? I want to break up our list. So I want to hear from you. Your bottom, let's say your bottom 6 through 11. So start from 11. Worst movie for you, and work your way up to 6. And then that way later on, we'll do our top 5 together. But I want to hear your bottom 6 movies and give me kind of a reason why and whether or not it affects you wanting to watch the movie in general. Or are you ranking them? Here's another question for you. Are you ranking these based off of, acting, performances, and story? Or are you using kind of I just enjoy it, I just don't enjoy it? So let me know that. So start with number 11 for you, work your way up. Let me hear it.
And 11, so I'm including the 2 extras, the 0.5ers, right? Solo and Rogue One.
Yeah, so we're going to include anything that was a theatrical release. So the 9 movies plus Solo and Rogue One is what we're going to do. We're going to leave Disney out. Disney can be a whole nother podcast for us down the road.
Yeah. I forget where I put Solo. I know I put it low, but I think I put 1 the lowest. And I did these based on whether or not I want to rewatch it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't, even though it has such an emotional connection for me, because it's the first one I got to see in theaters, and that was really special. When I prepped for 7, 8, 9, I didn't watch 1.
And why? I mean, what is it about 1 that you're just like, and again, this is at the magical moment to where you are 9, 10 years old.
Yeah, it's just so basic and childlike, and it doesn't have enough complexity for me. Like, I loved Jar Jar Binks when it came out. Like, who didn't love Jar Jar Binks? Oh my God. But
you said you wanted to fight, right?
You didn't love Jar Jar Binks?
You want to argue?
No, he's just cute, but I don't want to watch it again. That's a problem for me. So I had to put it at the worst.
So Jar Jar for you, which for a lot of people like myself, a little bit older, Jar Jar was the reason, one of the biggest reasons for us to point and say, this is why Lucas is ruining the prequels. But this is interesting because, again, you're coming from the generation after mine.
Yeah, I was a child. Jar Jar was cute.
And Lucas has always been very upfront with, he wants to have the cute stuff like the Ewoks, Jar Jar, because these are for kids. Yep. And a lot of us grown-ups now, we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't want that.
But that's why I don't want to rewatch it, but I have fond memories.
So did anything with well, I guess we'll get into that's more of a different movie. I was going to say about the romance between Anakin and Padme, with you being preteen or something. Did that do anything for you?
That bothered me. So I also liked 1 because I liked the potential of being a random person who ends up finding, based on a blood test, that I have the Force, And so that was also really cool as a kid. I think they did that kind of like, you're a peasant, but you could be a Jedi. No, I didn't. I still, even watching back, it still bothered me. Like, I get that he aged, but he was a child, right? And then, like, not long after, there was a romantic connection. And I understand he technically evolved, but I always saw little Anakin in my head. So that bothered me a little bit. So
let me ask you, so in episode 1, for a lot of people, had one of the greatest villains that unfortunately got shorted and died off really quick, at least within the theatrical, the movies, in the animated series and stuff. I'm talking about Darth Maul, who ends up, we're not spoiling this for anybody nowadays. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, I mean, tough luck.
Yeah.
In the animated show, which is canon, Darth Maul actually survives, and his story is fascinating. Did you like Darth Maul as the villain in episode 1, at least? Does that stand out for you? The double-bladed lightsaber, the lightsaber scene?
He had cool gadgets, I get that, but I like the complexity. Like, I like Vader a lot. Like, that is complex, and you can see, and I don't want to start alluding to my top, but like, that to me is just so cool. Like, I like the complexity. I even like Anyway, we'll get into the other movies. But yeah, no, Maul was not impressive to me. I'm actually shocked. I didn't watch that animated series. I watched The Bad Batch and another one, but the Disney ones. So I
Well,
don't
I will
know.
say, so we're not talking the animated stuff, but I will recommend, and I will say, I'll go on record, I prefer the animated and where they took it
Ooh.
all. And it's more of the Star Wars that I wanted Star Wars to be. But
Ooh.
that, again, a whole nother episode. So episode 1, The Phantom Menace for you is number 11. Number 10 you have on your list is,
Solo.
and so what's up with Solo being so low?
It was fine. It felt short for me. Like I thought it should have. I just thought they had a lot of space with the character, and it fell short. I also have such fond memories of 4, 5, 6 that, and I don't remember actors' names, so sorry in advance.
Sure.
But Han Solo to me, as a young guy, is like 4, 5, 6. He wasn't that old in 4, 5, 6, and so it was like a little hard seeing such a different characterization of a young Han Solo, and I didn't love that. But then additionally, it didn't carry the storyline forward the same way that like a Rogue One did, and it didn't have as much meaning for me the same way a Rogue One did. So I said it initially, it kind of apples to oranges. It's not that I dislike it. I don't think I'd watch it again.
So if it's on again, or somebody's watching it, or you go home and your little brother has it on or something,
I'm not going to change the channel, but I'm not going to start it.
yeah, I agree with you so far, because two of the ones that you've mentioned are in my bottom 6 as well.
Yeah.
And I think you alluded a little bit at the beginning of the podcast here at some point that our lists are actually kind of similar, which is kind of eerie. When I saw your list and I was kind of combining them and putting together, for the most part, they are very similar. Only maybe a
They
couple
are.
movies, I think, had a little difference. But
They
I'm not
are.
gonna. I wouldn't necessarily argue much about it. So
Yep.
so episode 1
Wait, are you going to
at the
share your
bottom,
bottoms?
Solo for you is number 10, and then
Yeah.
number 9 you have
I have, oh, I'm so mad. Rise of Skywalker.
the latest Star Wars movie that was released
Oh.
at number 9.
I actually left the theater mad. I was up the last two for sure, but the last one, 100%. Yeah, and I have them ranked the right way. Yeah, I left upset. I just was. It felt too predictable and repetitive and anticipatory. And I know a lot of the series you can anticipate, but I don't know. I still, when I think about it, I'm like, come on, you wasted an opportunity. That's how I felt. I felt like I anticipated a lot of it. Like I felt like I guessed and just knew what was happening around the corner, and like it was too repetitive. It was like a similar storyline repeating itself.
Do you think that the problem with episodes 7, 8, and 9, as well as Solo,
Yep.
and again, my movies, and I'll go through mine quickly after we get through yours, very, very similar. Do you think a lot of that had to do with the turmoil of directors and who was in charge of the movies? With Solo, I forget the original directors that were on there. They got fired because it wasn't going the way that Disney or what's her name? Kennedy, or
Oh yeah, I don't know, but
I
I know who
forget
you're talking about.
the head of Star Wars, the department for Disney. Didn't like the way it was going, so fired the original directors for Solo, brought in Ron Howard. He
Hmm.
had to kind of piecemeal things together. 7, 8, and 9, you have J.J. Abrams coming in at 7. Ryan Johnson, is that his name?
Yeah, I think so.
No, no,
That
now,
last of that.
and then JJ having to come back because there was so much backlash for 8,
I know.
and there just wasn't enough. For me, I think it was a continuity of storyline to where you had guys taking it all over the place, but no one to carry through the story. And I think that's kind of what happened with 9. It was the sense that JJ had to come back and kind of fix a few things,
Hmm.
which didn't make sense.
So I would say yes, right? Like that almost seems like it has to be the answer. But I was watching a documentary not long ago, and I'm not going to quote this perfectly, so fix it where I'm wrong. But I think I remember them saying it was on the creating Star Wars,
Mhm.
the first three, that they had an entirely different movie, and in editing they changed the entire movie the first time around. Like it was an entirely different thing, and then they just changed the whole storyline. And so it was like sitting down strategically and saying, no, this isn't actually the creative direction we wanted to take. And they didn't fully allude to what went wrong or what was bad about the first one, but they were like, Star Wars was almost not the Star
When you're saying the
Wars
first one, you're meaning episode 4,
four.
right?
Yeah, 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 the very
And I,
first.
and I think what you're referring to, and I think I watched the exact same documentary. It was George Lucas's first wife who was working with him that
Mm,
basically in the editing portion of the movie took out a bunch of stuff that just wasn't necessary, but actually gave him some of the ideas of tightening up the storyline to where it actually made sense, or it
yep.
was a better fit for the storyline going forward.
So it's like they've always had turmoil with directors and producers and editors. Like that is kind of the Star Wars history. It's like, come on, people, have a little creative license, do something a little different. Like the father plot line with Han Solo too. I was like, come on, we don't need daddy drama again. Like, oh,
It was very, it did get repetitive, although you go back to Lucas's original intent with the cadence and its poetry, repetition of things over and over again. So I get it where that's how they make the excuse for doing things kind of over again, because it's supposed to kind of rhyme.
mm,
The certain storylines rhyme from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 1, 2, and 3. I think the problem is, and the major difference with the turmoil that I was talking about is, at least with 4, 5, and 6, you had George Lucas was the guy, and then you had his wife and everybody else under him. It was still his vision going forward.
sure.
Whereas with 7, 8, and 9, and even with Solo and actually Rogue One had the same issue, you had a completely different guy get changed out, and then the
Yeah.
storyline completely changes. So 7, 8, 9, you had JJ come in with something to where he thought where they would want to take the storyline from 7 to 8 to 9 and have, okay, this is where we kind of want to end up in 9. Ryan
Mm,
Johnson comes in at 8, and he's like, fuck it, I'm changing everything just to kind of screw with everybody, which I would have preferred to see either JJ take all 3 or Ryan Johnson take all 3.
yep.
And be different. That's fine. Do whatever you want, but at least have some consistency in where the storyline goes.
Yeah. I think it's also just a little creative license behind the metaphor. Like I get we want them to have consistency and rhyme, and like I think you can have that, and I'll push a little deeper. It felt to me, so I'll never forget the first time I saw the second Spider-Man of my lifetime. And I distinctly remember being like, what? They can't remake Spider-Man. And my dad was like, are you kidding me? Your Spider-Man is not Spider-Man. And I was like, oh, how dare they? And it felt a little bit like that. Obviously not as starkly terrible as that,
Right.
right? It's not as like obvious as what they do there, but it still felt kind of similar. When instead, I think you could have gone deeper or explored differently. Like what the TV series I would say are doing today is like they're going deeper, they're exploring differently, they're approaching it very differently, but the themes and the values are still there and they're still the same. And so that's really where I only rank this one that low, because it was the last one and I think it had a lot of space and it just fell short for me.
I agree with you on that. Our movies on the bottom 6 are not that far off. We've had 11 for you, episode 1, The Phantom Menace, then the Solo, episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, and then your number 8 is the movie right before that we were just talking about, Ryan Johnson's episode 8, The Last Jedi.
Yeah, number 8. It's the same problem as number 9. It's the same problem for me. The only reason I rank it higher is because I don't put as much pressure on it because it wasn't the last episode in that trilogy. Honestly, that's the only reason it's above 9 for me, is because I put more pressure on the final concluding episode.
Is there anything in particular with 8, let's say, that sticks out for you that you just hate?
This better be 8. When she crashed her ship and it killed everything, like all you had to do was hyper jump and have one martyr crash their ship and it solved the problem. Where was that move earlier?
When they went to
jumped.
hyperspace and then it went through the Star Destroyer and destroyed that.
Quite literally jumped the shark. Like, you're telling me we had no martyr willing to do this a long time? Like, and it was just like so obvious. It was like, oh, solved all the problem. They all died. Like, what? You can't. And then also, that was also I hope this was also the episode, because the other reason I dislike it. It's also the episode where like Leia travels through space without dying.
Yeah.
I love that Leia finally came to her powers. That was great. But like, I mean, we got to have a little science, right? Like, we can't go, she'd be dead. Like, she'd be dead instantly. Like, the Force wrapped around her body, cocooned her, and kept her from freezing to death and suffocating.
Her skin was just this dewy crystal, she looks so good. And then she just kind of reaches out and flies back inside.
Yeah, the Force connections also bugged me throughout this entire trilogy. I felt like the Force connections were a little too vivid. It was like being on FaceTime with someone.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's because they're Kylo and Rey, right? With their Force connection, and it's because
it was like they were FaceTiming. My memory of a Force connection is more spiritual and cerebral, and not like I'm looking at you. And the way they presented it,
that's why they were a dyad? Isn't that a dyad? Yeah, a dyad, because they were so connected.
They had a way to explain it, fine, but
I'm with you on every single one of those, and probably 50 other things, as well as characters I absolutely hated in that movie. I remember sitting there for 8 from the very beginning of the movie, and that's where Poe is in front of the Star Destroyer, and he was having that kind of funny, I guess, smart-ass conversation with the Star Destroyer guy. Mm-hmm. The humor was just a huge miss for me. And the entire time sitting in the movie theater, I told my wife, I had this pissed off look on my face. Like, I was like disgusted with the movie. I was ready to walk out, and I make fun of people that, I'm walking out of. I thought the movie was trash from the very, very get-go, and I was so disappointed. I felt personally attacked, in a sense that I was like, you know what? After 7, I was like, okay, well, let's see how the trilogy ends up. So I'm not. I remember saying, 7 was very similar to the original trilogy, Death Star again, and the trench or what. But let's see where we go, because it's the first of 3 movies, and I'm like, okay. So I sit down for 8, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? And it was one thing after another. You said with the Leia, and then they go to that gambling colony on Canto Blight for some reason.
Forgot about that.
The character of Rose and that whole thing, and I'm like, I don't. What is going on?
Yep.
And as much as I do dislike that movie, and that's one of my bottom 2 movies that I probably will never, ever have a desire to watch. I still would say, if you just give Rian Johnson all 3 movies, also, I would rather have seen where he was wanting to take it then, as opposed to him trying to change whatever he didn't like that JJ did first. And then they were like, well, we don't like what Rian did, so let's bring JJ back to change things that Rian did.
Yep.
So we never progressed with anything.
No, I think that's why I like 9 less, is because, fine, you had me in 8. I was really bothered by a lot of things that happened, but I committed this far, and then they got to 9, and it was like, what? Like, you're not even going to move forward with the weird shit that happened in 8. We're just going to switch gears here. How dare you?
I think JJ felt painted in a corner, and there was only so many things he can do, especially like bringing back Palpatine again. And like the whole funny thing is like the rebels are back and they're planning their mission. And just to explain Palpatine being back, I think it was Poe that was like, and somehow Palpatine's back. And that was the only line to explain the whole thing. And you're just like, oh, okay, that sounds good to me.
Okay. You need to have a better villain each time. Like, this is 101, right? Like, the bad guy needs to get bigger and different and more interesting. You can't just bring back the old villain, and you also can't just bring back the old weapons. Like, the evolution of the Death Star into the planet, not creative enough for me. Come on, technology. Really? That's all we got? Death Star is just in a planet now? Oh, wait, and getting rid of the Death Star, very similar. You have to, like, perfectly shoot the middle of the thing. Not interesting.
I know. Well, you mentioned the bad guy, and it has to be hard to follow up what is probably the greatest villain or representative of the greatest villain of all time in Darth Vader. How do you come up with a better villain than Darth Vader? And I really thought that with Kylo Ren and how I thought they were going to take him, and I thought that what's the actor's name that played Kylo Ren? Whatever his name is. I'm blanking out. He's a good actor.
Yes. I thought he was really well cast.
And I thought he was an excellent cast for it.
Okay.
And I thought what I initially was thinking where they could take his character, and even Rey at the time, I was like, this could be interesting. I mean,
wait, where do you think it would go? I'm so curious.
I honestly, you would have saved me in episode 8 if when Kylo Ren reached out his hand and asked Rey to join him, and it was him and her to go do something, and then somehow between 8 and 9 or through 9, they ended up switching roles, so Rey ends up being like the bad guy.
Ooh.
Just to change things up. And then he turns from bad to good, but she turns from good to bad.
And she goes too bad, so he has to go good.
And so, so just to kind of balance it out or whatever. But it would have been different. It would have made things interesting, but they didn't. And then they went kind of the weird, easy way out by having this kind of love thing that didn't make any sense to me.
Oh, so bad. It was so
at
bad.
all. And then, so there was a lot of things that they could have probably done if they were wanting to be super different, and they just didn't get the opportunity to do that.
Okay, so what I wanted to happen, though, just really quick,
tell me.
The opposite. I wanted him to go good, but like false good, because of like a false desire for what he thought he needed out of life, which is this like romantic relationship with this woman, whatever, and then end up going evil. Like, I wanted him to be the big villain in the end, and it was like sort of a battle in his mind. And he's like, okay, this is what I always should have done. This is what my family wanted me to do. I'm in a moment of weakness because I'm upset that I killed my father. This woman is really pulling me and gravitating me towards her. Okay, I'm going to go good. And then it's kind of like 3 all over again as episode 9, where he just like, he can't stay good. Like, it's just not, it doesn't work. And he ends up being evil. Like, that's what I wanted to happen. And I was like, no, you can't have just like, it was just, and then the whole like saving each other's lives things. No.
Yeah, that was weird too. And then
we can't save lives with the Force. Like, that's the whole, what is this? That's not supposed to be the good side of the Force.
Are you a Harry Potter person?
I am, but I'm not a full book person. So I read them once, now more than once.
Just to go back onto episode 9, the ending of it with Palpatine and Rey and that whole fight scene, that's a direct ripoff of Harry Potter with Voldemort and Harry at the very end of that thing, to where they're both pointing their wands and doing this,
and there's like a connection,
and then all of a sudden she wins out and then he explodes just like I was like, that's the exact scene from.
And her taking the strength from the other Jedi. I was like, what? This is it. It was problematic. It was weird.
All right, so it's lucky we started with the bad ones here, because then we're going to get into the good ones. So at 11, episode 1, The Phantom Menace for you. Solo, episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. Number 8 for you, episode 8, The Last Jedi. And then at 7, you have episode 7, The Force Awakens. So you have the most recent 3 movies in your bottom 6.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me what your issue is then with episode 7, which we were all super excited to see where they could take Star Wars.
Yeah. It's not actually. So once I think we've now crossed a line to where I'm not debating the worst of the worst anymore. Now I'm switching gears to, I do actually think, obviously, because I'm a fan, that there's so much good. And then we got into struggle of placement. So I would argue from here up, I'm talking the best of the best.
Okay.
Well, before I was talking the worst of the worst. So I would actually put this in a different category.
So can we say for you, 8 on down are movies that you really have no desire to see anymore? So episode
Correct.
8, 9, Solo, and episode 1 for you are movies that you're just like, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, but 7 backwards in time plus Rogue One. No, I'm very here for it. So yeah, this is like a least good of the best.
Yeah, and they're going to have to fall that way anyways. And I agree with you there. 7 is also another one that I think you and I have fairly close to each other, and I would watch it again. Mm-hmm. Was it the perfect movie? No. Was it a copycat of the original trilogy? It is very, very similar. Death Star again, or the planet that looks like a Death Star, but bigger. I don't know what the line was in the movie where they made fun of that. But 7, you're saying, is a movie that is the least of the ones that you would actually watch again.
Yeah, I would definitely watch it again. I don't have bad feelings about it. It's just the only reason, honestly, I think it doesn't rank higher for me is the rest of the trilogy, I think, drags it down. And I didn't like the Death Star repetition, and I didn't like the father repetition. Like, that stuff bummed me out. But other than that, I love Rey, love her character and what I thought could happen with like her lineage and where that was going. I loved the Stormtrooper, like love a transition, like give me that happening. That's so great. And then I'm gonna forget the name. The woman with the glasses who lived in like the weird world who had the lightsaber. Frog lady. Yes.
Yeah.
I loved that part. Like I wanted more of that. I was like, let's spend more time there. Like we didn't even have to escalate to meeting. And then Kylo Ren I thought was probably the best in that movie. So I was happy with all of those things. It was more, I feel like it just didn't get to go to fruition. And any of the trilogies were really hard for me because I ranked them together. Like you'll see they're almost all next to each other. It was very hard for me to separate the trilogies.
Yeah, 7, I agree with you there too. There was a lot of just nostalgia and feels for me when it came out, watching the movie again, seeing Han and Chewie walk on the Millennium Falcon again after we hadn't seen them forever. Cool Chewie, we're home, and the hairs on my arm go up. There was a lot of things. I agree with you with Rey. I was like, I think she's going to be a great character to find out where she's going to go. But the harbinger and all of this is at the very end where Kylo, who's supposed to be this kind of trained Sith, Rey beats him pretty good, but then people say, well, he was wounded because he got shot by Chewie after he killed Han or whatever, and so he wasn't really like full power.
Him, that whole moment though was so great. Chewie shooting him, I was like, fuck yeah, Chewie. Sorry.
And that's another one that gave me chills was when Han died and fell over, but then the reaction from Chewie crying out and screaming, like I just talking about it now gives me like chills on it. There's a lot of things that I do like about episode 7, kind of in the middle for me with all the other movies, but it was one to where I really thought, okay, we have somewhere to go with this, and I'm excited to see where they take it. And I remember saying, I'm going to withhold judgment until I see 8 and 9 and all of it put together before I place my final judgment on 7. Here's mine really quickly, very similar to yours. So my worst one of all of them, and we're slightly different on this one. Mm-hmm. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is my bottom movie of all the movies, but it's right there with Episode 8, The Last Jedi, for me as For me, those are just two what I would consider unwatchable movies, just in my opinion. Like I have zero desire, and like everything about the entire movie kind of bothers me for
Can I ask a
whatever reason.
question? You
Solo is my
hang on
number
before
9.
before you jump on. You don't give them leniency for being in the middle, which I think is interesting. I kind of like gave them leniency as like a build-up movie, both of them.
Yeah, no, yes, and I understand what you're saying there, and the movies are so bad for me that even taking that into consideration, being the middle movies, they were so badly done. I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
going back to kind of what you said with how part of your evaluation of these movies are your desire to kind of watch them again or just how entertained you are with them. 10 and
Mm-hmm.
11 for me, episode 8, episode 2 for me, Attack of the Clones. Probably never watch again. I've got the
Yeah.
movies. I bought the DVDs. I got the Blu-rays on them. I'll never watch it. I just have no
Got the
desire.
Blu-ray.
Number 9 for me is Solo.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get it. It wasn't interesting for me. Number 8, episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The only two saving graces for me in that movie. One was the Darth Maul and the fighting scene at the very end, and then the pod racing scene. And why this matters for me is at the time that this movie came out, the pod racing scene, and this was 1999, 2000, was the DVD that you would test your system with for audio because of the audio sound of the pod racing scene was, and everybody had these movie rooms we were building and big screen TVs, DVDs were out, surround sound. So everybody was making these big movie rooms in their homes, early 2000s. That scene, the pod racing scene, was one of the movies that that's what you pop into your DVD to test out your sound system. To be like, oh man, this movie room is awesome. Listen to the pods on here. They're just racing around.
Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I need context on that.
So that was one to where it brings back other memories because that was one to where I was a big movie buff. That scene right there is always kind of a positive thing for me. So there's two things for the Phantom Menace that I did like. Number 7 for me was episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. I would rate that even lower if I could. They're just those other 4 movies. I just don't like them that much more. And then we get into the number 6 where I'm kind of in that same situation where 6 on up for me is going to be movies that I will probably watch several times over. So let's go ahead and do your 6 to number 1. Chelsea, what are your top 6 Star Wars movies?
Yeah. So starting at 6, your worst movie is my number 6. I get why you don't like it. I can guess. I could just guess, or at least why I don't like it. I don't love the love scenes. I like the gray. I like anything with gray, and I think they're starting to develop gray. It's the evolution of one of the best villains ever. And so that holds so near and dear to my heart. And I don't think, here's the other reason I was shocked that you put middle movies at the bottom. I don't think I can love 4, 5, 6 the way I love 4, 5, 6 without truly appreciating 2 and definitely loving 3. So that is why I put that there. I actually don't know that I thought Vader was such an amazing villain until you see 2 and 3. I think they set a stage and they create a villain and they create a character. So that is where I'm putting 2 at 6.
You're absolutely valid and absolutely right, and I 100% agree with you.
It's your worst movie though. It's your lowest movie.
Watching somebody fall from grace, and turn into the darkest character in the galaxy, and how does that happen? And you actually kind of feel sorry for him, like you see the reasons why.
Yeah.
I agree with you so much on it. I think the execution was shit, is why.
No, it's
And
fair. It's
nothing on
fair.
Hayden Christensen. The acting, and this is my big problem with most of the movies, not only the theatrical release movies that we're talking about, but a lot of the Disney movies. I don't understand why the acting is so poor with some of the characters, especially now that with Disney Plus, we've got big budgets. There is no reason why you're casting terrible actors.
Yeah.
And that's what you have. You just absolutely terrible. And let me check myself, because I don't necessarily, Hayden Christensen, he's not an Academy Award winning actor, but the way he had to portray Anakin was kind of forced upon him by Lucas. It's a certain style that Lucas wanted him to play. I get it. So I don't necessarily blame Hayden Christensen, but I just don't like the way it was executed. I agree with everything you said. Watching how he becomes this person, yes.
Yeah.
I just don't think it was done well.
No, I think that's very fair. Like I hear the acting. Looking back, I can't tell if it's like the editing or the cutting in between scenes. It's like I almost wish, but maybe this is acting. I just wish they gave more time to just kind of sit in the silence and the emotional distress and turmoil of the character. And I don't think that was it. It was like we couldn't allow for a pause. Like we couldn't allow for emotional discomfort. And so I put it less on the actor. Maybe it is an actor, but to me it was more in editing, how they cut the scenes together. I don't even know the technical words for this, but
I think it's a direction thing, and I think that is a huge issue with Lucas, not only with his direction but with his writing. And he's notorious for being a terrible script writer for what they have to say. And I think a lot of the documentaries that I've seen that are out there, they all kind of just say the same thing. He even admits it, I believe, that he's just not a really good script writer. He can visualize a fantastic universe that's super cool, but dialogue is not his thing at all. And it certainly isn't. And unfortunately for Hayden Christensen, and even Natalie Portman looks awful. And she's an Academy Award winning actress. I mean, she's really good.
And it is shocking to think how good she is and to watch her in these 3 movies. It's rough. And I'm just terrible at names like this. I'm terrible at names because I'm a twin, by the way. I've been called the wrong name my whole life and I just don't put value to them. Han Solo, the real actor's name is
Harrison Ford.
Okay, Harrison Ford's ability to execute the shittiest lines ever in the most amazing way. That's why I have to put Solo low as like a side note. We're not talking about that. But in terms of acting, Lucas gets away with it because he got lucky. Like Harrison Ford is just like, excuse me, I'll take these shit lines and I'll make them an industry. Like I will transform cinema with your crappy writing.
But do you know, I think the magic that Harrison Ford had with Han Solo, and it goes back to what you just said 2 minutes ago, is his ability to, with this, and for people that are just listening, I'm making a circle around my face. His acting with his sarcasm and his portrayal of the Han Solo attitude comes with him not necessarily saying things, but it's his visual expressions when he's not saying things. That's the magic of Harrison Ford, is not saying the dialogue that Lucas can't write.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. Yeah. So yes. So I put it 2. I put it at 6 because I love the Vader evolution. I love the gray. I love the dark. I love the turmoil. I love the real. So I put it there. Rogue One, I was blown away. I just loved Rogue One. I wanted more of Rogue One, and I understand how that would be hard to do, but I loved it. I loved that it added depth to the story that I already love. I know what happens at the end of it, right? Like I know where those plans go and what those plans do and why those plans matter. And I just think they nailed it. They went perfectly deeper in a space. Rogue One came out after 8, but before 9.
Ooh, good question. When did Rogue One come out? Because Rogue One, initially what they were wanting to do was a standalone movie in between the big movies. So
Yeah, I
Rogue
think
One
that's
came out first. So that was after 7. So it was 7, then Rogue One, then 8, and then Solo. Solo was a disaster. So Disney's like, we're not doing these anymore. And then everything's going on Disney Plus.
okay. So that makes more sense because one of my responses as well with Rogue One was like, what happened to 8? And I liked 8. I didn't put it that low, right? Technically, but I was so fired up. I was waiting for it. I was ready to go. I was like, yes, go deeper in a storyline I love with interesting, complex characters who also we don't need to live. Like, I like that concept too. Like, their lives don't really matter, so we can do whatever we want to them.
And did you happen to, and I know how you have mentioned how much you've hated some of the director's commentary, but even some of the documentaries on Rogue One and how much of a disaster that movie was.
Ooh, I didn't
Three
know.
quarters of the way through, and that's why they got rid of the director and brought in a new one who basically reshot the movie. And if you notice, a lot of the trailer footage, if you go back in time, a lot of the trailer footage is nowhere to be seen in the movie because the trailers that came out for Rogue One were badass.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so good. And you're like, I remember everybody was saying this Rogue One coming up. This is the Star Wars that the grownups want. Insurgents and dirty and, stormtroopers were all dirty and beat up. The heads were on pikes. This is the one that, I don't know if I want to bring my kid to. Perfect. And the director, I usually have the names off the top of my head. I don't know why I can't remember them tonight. 3/4 of the way done with the movie, and Disney did not like what was going on and basically put him on the back seat and brought in a new director who I think might be the one that's doing Andor. Is that right?
I wonder, there's so many similarities there. I mean, besides just the character, right? And the actors, but yeah, I'm not sure. I really do wonder. I do think it stood alone so well. I also, the other thing that I would add to it is I really appreciate something that can technically stand on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if sticking on the trilogy train was the problem with some of these other things.
Right.
Like even really quality series that are miniseries and they commit to it from the beginning. Like, that's it. We are starting this and we are ending it. I think you have so much more space and freedom. You don't have to like plan for some hypothetical longevity of these characters. And they're doing prequels of these characters. So now there is longevity of them. So they nailed it,
Well, the whole thing with Rogue One, you said this, we know where it ends up. We know every single one of them's going to die. And knowing that, and as everything gets kind of ramped up in the movie, and you're just like, oh my God, they're doing all this, and we all know where this ends, was like so sad, but it's what I love. I mean, Rogue One from the get-go has always been one of my more favorite movies. But I remember coming out of Rogue One, a lot of the critics said that there's a lot of problems with the movie itself, a lot of holes in there. And I'm like, I don't care. I just enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't even name things that felt like holes. Did you think it was dark enough? Because I didn't know it was originally darker and then they Disneyed it off. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, initially it was like super dark. And then the new guy came in and they changed a few things. And an interesting note here, and we had mentioned the poll that I did on Instagram this week on the people on the Tossing Salad podcast, what their top 3 movies are in Star Wars. Guess what was number 1?
Rogue One?
Rogue One.
Really?
Rogue One, followed by a tie between episode 4 and episode 5. So A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, 2 and 3, a tie. Rogue One was number 1. That surprised me.
I like want to make age assumptions. Like I want to be an ageist with this.
You can look at my insights. I think my followers actually skewed older.
Really?
They skew older and they're like 80% female, but whatever you
I
want to do with that.
I mean, I like it. I liked it so much because it was dark, because it was everything. But you can't touch the original. We've talked about all the reasons why for me, so that's untouchable. And then I'll do my four. And I
Okay.
know you're not gonna. Well, I think you do like this too. But Revenge of the Sith for me, like episode three for me, if I didn't love 4, 5, 6 so much, well, actually, 4, 5, 6 didn't exist. It wouldn't hold purpose or meaning. Because 4, 5, 6, it holds meaning because of this villain who I love so much, Vader, and I freaking loved it. I also, it's just so good. It's so good. Like, let's see the good guy burn in a volcano. Like, holy shit. It's awesome.
I agree. I think episode 3 is still the darkest of all the movies, at least here on
Yes.
this theatrical list that we have.
Yes.
It is one of my most enjoyable Star Wars movies to watch. It's very high on my list. We'll go over my list here in just a second. The scene, I mean, there's some goofy stuff in here also, but the scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin at the very end, where you feel the love that they have for each other, the hatred that Anakin is now feeling for Obi-Wan, feeling betrayed, and watching that whole thing play out, and the burning in the lava scene was like, I can't believe we went there, but we did. The killing of the younglings, I was like, let's kill some more. I'm just like, I wanted it to go super dark. And obviously we knew they weren't going to show a bunch of that stuff. But to see Anakin get to this point, and this goes back to what you were saying with episode 2, and watching somebody fall to get to the point to where he is now this dark, evil person. I love the execution of it for episode 3.
It's so, yes, I totally agree. So I have my undergrad degree, I studied genocide.
Oh.
So very weird turn. But my favorite is a weird word when you're talking about genocide. My favorite theory, my favorite prevailing theory in explaining why tragedies occur is around humanism. And it's the belief that like everyone holds good and evil at every time. So, you know, they were studying generals in the Holocaust, and they were like, these people are not coming back insane. Like, these seem to be sane individuals who have loving wives and children, and people couldn't deal with that. And that's where humanism evolved, was like, people are both good and evil. Like, people are complex, and there's complexity there. And so this episode for me, I think does, now this is why I have to like 2 too, because I feel like you can't like 3 without liking 2 in my personal opinion. But it does it for me. Like, it's so good in bringing that out. And I think it makes, I have to keep counting, it makes 6 so good. Like, without this episode, 6, and seeing the sort of like very short comeback, like way too short. Like, you do not get to see enough emotional turmoil and how quickly he suddenly cares for his son.
The
But
redemption, you mean, for Vader at the end?
yeah, it's not deep enough for me. It's deep enough because 3 exists. Like, it's deep enough because you know the depth of the character is there, and you know it's possible, and like they explore humanism in a beautiful way. The idea that like you can be in your lizard brain and have an emotional breakdown and kill a bunch of children out of nowhere, and then switch to like love being such a big driver that you hate. Like, I actually think it's hate in that scene, and I think you're probably saying this, like, only driven by love. Like, betrayal only matters because love was present. You know, if love wasn't present, someone can't betray you. Like, trust
Right.
wasn't there. I love it so much. I think it's amazing. If I didn't have the emotional connection I had to the other 3, that may be my top.
And I think the execution of it all is why I like 3 and why I can't like 2. Although I understand what you're saying in why you say if you're gonna like 3, you have to bring 2 along with it. I agree with what you're saying. The execution for me is different, and that's why. And watching Anakin and watching Hayden Christensen being able to portray the betrayal, the love, and it almost makes you not like you agree with Anakin, but you see, you kind of, I kind of understand his point.
Yeah.
And
I
he's,
think they did.
Padme comes walking off the spaceship, and then all of a sudden Obi-Wan's right behind her. He's thinking, oh, Obi-Wan's getting a little, what's the deal between the two of you now? So I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I definitely think more than most, they did a really good job having you potentially project where you could have a break and make such egregious decisions. And I know some people are like, I would not, of course, obviously, you're also not carrying a lightsaber and like on a foreign planet. So like, don't even come at me with that. But for a half a second to act like any person isn't capable of evil acts, I think is like selling humanity short. And I don't know how you explain any of the terrible things that occur. And so instead to say like, yeah, it takes a lot of patience and hard work to like be composed, and it takes a lot of self-reflection, it takes a lot of energy, and it is really easy to lose it. And like if you've ever just lost it yelling at someone, or if you ever hit anyone, like it's easy. And of course they take it much further than that. But no, I totally agree. I think that, I assume, is one of few movies where people are like, oh, except for that, what was that murder trend on HBO that everybody was obsessed with? There was like a murderer, and everybody was like, oh, I could maybe be that murderer, played by a guy that looks like Shia LaBeouf, but not him.
Oh, I didn't see that. We only
It's
get
not
HBO
good.
like once every 2 years, and we just binge everything for a month,
Yeah.
and then we cancel HBO.
Everyone loved it. I didn't watch it, but normally people are evil and they're evil, and like I could never be said evil, and like no one I know could ever be that evil, and like that evil isn't real, and it isn't touchable, and it isn't something that's attainable. And it's like, nope, that evil is very attainable,
But
and like
when you
anyone
deal
can
with
slay.
twins, there's always one. So now is it Chelsea or Brianna
You never
that could
know.
turn to be the evil one?
But in this series, there's no evil twin.
Yeah, but I'm talking about you and Brianna. I mean, if one of the two of you had to be the one that would fall to the dark side, who's it going to be? Who's a little bit darker?
Okay, so while I am more direct and honest, I'd say, about my darkness, I think that's exactly why I wouldn't be the one who falls.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see what she has to say.
Yeah, I'd be curious, but I would only argue Brianna because I think she wears the Southern hospitality a lot more on the front. And then I think there's a
And
lot
then
more
she'll kill
space.
you when you're not expecting it.
Yeah, there's like more space for a break. Just like, I'm done being polite. Well, I'm like, there's no polite. It's like, it doesn't spike because like it's already there. It's like already, so it's kind of what you get.
So if you guys are listening to this and you've made it this far, Chelsea is twin sisters with Brianna, who we do quite a few podcasts, lives. We do a lot of interactions with on Instagram, and she is beautifully bemused. So if you know who beautifully bemused is, you guys know who we're talking about. So we just finished up number 5 for you, which is Rogue One. Episode 3 was number 4, Revenge of the Sith. And now your top 3, Chelsea's top 3 Star Wars movies. Bring it. Let's hear it.
Yep. So it is 5, 6, 4. And a lot of it, if you were tuning in at the very beginning, is, my dad. And it's what created my love for the universe. And the idea of putting Rogue One above the original trilogy is wild to me. But yeah, it set the foundation for all of these other beautiful, beautiful things to happen. So yeah, 4.
Well, here's the question then.
6, 5.
With such an influence from your dad with the Star Wars, and I know that a lot of people his age, my age, Empire Strikes Back episode 5 is usually the number 1 of all the Star Wars movies. How do you have that as third behind the other 2 then? If he's had this much influence on you, how is that 3?
I know, I was struggling. I don't think he's tried to convince of like bests as much as just like draw love for it. I was struggling. I think I ended up going with the origin story and just like the creation of it. I also think it was before they got so they were still a little dirty. I don't know. I kind of think 5 and 6, especially 6, and I don't know why I put 6 as 2 now that I'm looking at it, but I did. So I'm going to roll with that. Like kind of regretting that. But especially 6 got a little too good and evil. It got like a little too black and white for me. Like I mentioned, the redemption of Vader, I didn't think was as deep as it could have gone. And I'm trying to say all this with a really light tone because like the hatred I had about the other episodes we talked about, like I don't want that present here. Like I'm
Right.
talking about minute levels of bothersome. But yeah, there's something about the origin story for me and the horizon and Luke walking on the horizon. It was just so amazing. And the droids for the first time. And I think the nostalgia of that is lost in the other episodes. Like there's not the introduction of the character anymore. So I'd say like the character introductions, the Han Solo introduction, the like Wookiee introduction, that even though it's not as deep and as interesting, it's before things get so black and white. It's before things get so like make a choice. I don't actually, I'm going to keep 6. I'm going to keep 6 number 2, even though I had a momentary regret because there's a resolution and the 5, and I know why everyone loved the 5. My dad talked about it all the time. Like when he's left on the bridge, he was left on the bridge and I had to wait 2 years. I didn't have to wait 2 years. I don't think that helped. My
Right.
dad had to wait 2 years with him on the bridge, dying and oh my God. Right. I didn't have to wait.
The the great thing about 4, 5, and 6, and really I can, like I said earlier, I can come up with scenes throughout most of these movies where it just elicits this, either the hairs on your arms will stand up or you feel the scene. And we're not blessed with a lot of great acting all throughout any of these movies, but there's certain scenes that are just so powerful. And 4, 5, and 6, like Return of the Jedi, or 6, let's say, the very end where Luke and Vader are fighting, going back and forth, and it's this probably 10-minute ordeal in the movie. And you have the Emperor manipulating both of them, pulling the strings, right? And you have Vader and Luke kind of playing cat and mouse, going back and forth. And then it gets brought in about his sister, which, Vader finally figures it out. And then Luke loses it. And then they just go at it. And Luke is finally like, he's tapping into the dark side as well. And he's just beating the shit out of Vader to the point to where he overmatches him. And he gets to the point to where you feel the passion, you feel the hate that Luke is having towards Vader, and he's beating him. And then the scene cuts to the Emperor, who's fucking just just like, oh my God, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want to happen.
Yep.
And then at that moment, Luke catches himself, stops, throws away the lightsaber, says, I'm not that person.
Yep.
And I think in all of this, I do want to mention, in a lot of these scenes, they would not be the scenes without John Williams' score in the background. Without his composing of the music in the background, these wouldn't be half the scenes that they are.
Yep.
But just so many scenes like that within 4, 5, and 6 that I remember, and I'm just like, oh,
yeah.
I remember being a kid. And again, I may have a little bias in how I ranked mine. And we'll go through mine real quick after we finish with yours. So
I'm not surprised at the top, but yeah, no, I think the music also, and we haven't talked about that at all, the music, and that's all I heard, was how groundbreaking the music was. Well, I would say when I was watching them, I think it was already repeating, not that music, but I think the concept of music being used in that way and like customized in that way was already so repetitive in media. Like the way my dad talks about how the music was used in the first three movies was just like nothing that had ever been seen or fathomed before. And I honestly think it's why they don't seem old school to me.
Yeah, well,
Like,
I mean, it's the use of symphony orchestras to score the music. I mean, that's just timeless music and instruments that you're using. I mean, we're not using an 80s soundtrack of heavy hair metal bands in the background. Yes, Darth Vader and Luke are fighting, and it's just
yeah. Do you remember the scene where Darth Maul dies? I think it's Darth Maul. I think it's this scene, and you can see the strings when he's falling down the hole.
Darth Maul. When he gets cut up in episode 1.
You can see the strings.
I don't remember, but it wouldn't surprise me that snuck in,
There were just moments in 1, 2, 3 where I was like, how are the special effects worse? Like, what did you people do? And if you go back to 4, 5, 6, I think I really, and what you're saying, it's the music, it's the acting, it saves a lot of what could seem as outdated special effects.
Just listening to some of the things that it sounds like you appreciate in some of these movies, I would really, when you have the opportunity, give the animated shows a shot all the way through. There's going to be some where you're like, I mean, this is, Clone Wars and what's the other one? Rebels.
I've seen a lot of Rebels.
But you're going to have to watch. There's a lot of episodes on there that I would put those episodes up as high as some of these shows. Like, they are so good, and they really fill in a lot of the background that you and I have talked about in wanting to know what leads up to certain things and the motivation behind evil, gray area stuff. If you're into this gray area stuff, that's one of the long running themes. You get into gray Jedis, all that stuff.
I know. I do. And I've heard this, like, my husband and our friend Mikey, they're like, all of that they've seen. And then the fan fiction, like, they have
fan fiction,
quality
a
fighting.
little too geeky for me.
Oh, they've read it all. They have the quality fighting lightsaber. I should have brought that up here. It's downstairs in my husband's office. It's like, it can actually be used for fencing.
Wow.
It is a fighting grade lightsaber. Oh, they're the whole 9. So I know, I've been convinced there's something about the people element that it makes it a little harder for me to connect with the cartoons. Even though I've seen the cartoons, it doesn't get as deep for me just because it misses the human face and the reactions. The actor who plays Luke, who I can't, yes, another reason I'll put 6 as number 2. His acting and the quality of what he portrays in 6, it wasn't as amazing in 5. I wouldn't say it wasn't good, right? But 6, especially that last scene with Vader, I just feel like he was at his peak with the character. Like, he was just fully embodiment.
That was, it's exactly why I love 6. I understand what you're saying with the animated, about being attached to an animated character, but I know you as of tonight, for real,
You're blind date.
You introduced yourself to me, what was it, a month or 2 ago? You're like, hey, I'm Brianna's sister. We're seeing each other on her lives or something. And very nice of you to reach out or what. But we don't necessarily, you don't post as much and,
Yeah.
And then tonight it's like, I feel like I've known you for a while now and I kind of just understand you. I understand what you're saying with the animated. Like, you don't know that you can get attached to a cartoon character or whatever. I promise you, I think I know enough of you tonight and what you appreciate. You will be attached to cartoon characters.
Okay, how about this? I'm going to do it. You can't judge how quick I can binge. I'm going to do it.
We'll see.
And then
there's a lot of episodes. I don't know if you can binge that much.
No. In whatever amount of time, I'll come back.
What's your take on Ahsoka? I'm just curious on that particular character of what you know about her. Do you like her or not?
I don't know. I don't know that I have.
You don't know much about her, or you don't know what you think about her yet?
I don't know what I think about her yet. I
Okay.
know she plays a heavier role in the cartoons, right?
I would say if you can get past her initial, when she's kind of first introduced and everybody hated her, and
Mm-hmm.
she was not one of my, I was like, oh, this is why I hate these cartoons, and I'm just going to stick to the movies. But it's because of the animated shows, the episodes. She is probably, and this could be another podcast on who our favorite characters are. She may vie for one of the top 3 characters for me, and that includes
Really?
Vader. Yeah, absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay, okay. I mean, I should do it. I know I should do it. Plus, there's not a lot of, I don't know. I still struggle with what happened to the pandemic with TV out there. So,
So okay, so we're going on an hour and 30 minutes. I mean, this is great. I love that we
yeah.
were able just to do this. And again, this is like the first time Chelsea and I have actually sat and like really talked to each other. And it's like we're talking 2 hours of Star Wars. So your number one movie, episode 4, A New Hope. So
Mm-hmm.
one, episode 4, New Hope. Number 2 for you, Return of the Jedi, and then 3, Empire Strikes Back. Those are your top
Yes.
3.
Yes.
And you feel good about having Empire as your third.
Yeah, I'm sticking to it. I'm sticking to it. Just I really, really, really think waiting years between 5 and 6 makes a huge difference, and I didn't have to do it. I
Would
think
you
it
say,
changes a lot.
do you have a cutoff? Like, is 1, 2, and 3 like by far up there? And then it's like 4, or and then it's like your number 4 and number 5 later on? Or is it like your number, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're grouping them.
No, I mean I really love episode 3, which is my number 4. So it's
So
tight
would that
up
be the
there.
grouping? Like would you group it as your top 4 is like higher?
I'd say 1 through 5. I'd add Rogue One.
1 through
I
5.
know that's a
Okay.
lot.
No,
I was struggling. So when you were like, send me a ranking, I was like, what?
our lists are not that far off. We have, I think, a couple movies that 3 or 4 position points are off. Everything else is very, very similar. My number 6, Return of the Jedi. My number 5, The Force Awakens, which I could easily be convinced to move that down and have
Mm-hmm,
Return of the Jedi
mm-hmm.
move up. And then you get into a situation where, kind of like you, I would say from 4, 3, 2, 1, all 4 of these I could watch. I will watch hundreds of times before I die. Rogue One is number 4. It would be probably higher if I didn't have the reverence that I do for the top 3.
Yep.
Number 3, episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, just because I'm twisted. I love just Anakin being a badass and just killing everything, and then
So good.
he's burning in lava. I mean, I thought that was awesome.
So good.
Number 2 for me, A New Hope, and then my number 1 is Empire Strikes Back, which again, for most people my age, that's no surprise.
The classic. I am really impressed with your ability to split the trilogies. I really did not.
If you ask me on a different day, who knows? I may have things change. As far as, between a 1 and 2 or 2 and a 3, but my top ones will forever, those probably will never change. And for sure, the very bottom ones, those will never change. Now, to end our podcast, and we've had a really good conversation, and I would say that we're both probably above average Star Wars fans. I don't think we're not like freaky.
I'm
Are
not
we?
top. I know I'm above average, but I don't think more than that. I don't mind nerding out for 2 hours about it, so that's probably putting us a little freaky.
Well, it's safe to say we're both a little bit above average. So what I
Yeah.
did was I combined the 2 ratings.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be the definitive ranking. After listening to Brian and Chelsea on the Tossing Salad podcast, this is the definitive 1 through 11 ranking of all the Star Wars movies. Number 1 is episode 4, New Hope, followed by Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Sith, Return of the Jedi, Rogue One, and then The Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, Attack of the Clones, Last Jedi, The Phantom Menace, and then Solo. And that is when you combine our two scores and you get the average. I am kind of geeky with stuff like this. Like my family is too. We've done this as a family where we ranked all these Star Wars movies and then we averaged them out. I don't know if you've seen Hamilton, the play.
Oh yeah.
We've gone through and we've done that as a family to where we've ranked all the songs and we've come up with the family's top 5. We do just silly stuff like that. So
wait,
that
how do we
there,
compare to your family's ranking?
The family rankings is a little bit off because my boys, who are now 16 and 18, and how old's your little brother?
He's 12. He's not 12. He's 20.
20. So he's a little bit older than my boys. So my boys, my oldest was born in 2004, which I believe that's when episode 3 came out. So definitely on the tail end of that generation that grew up with it. But I think really for the most part, if it wasn't for me, 7, 8, 9 would be the ones that they would grow up with.
Yeah.
But totally. because it was me, they saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They had all the comic books. I mean, we had all the toys and everything. So their ratings are a little different, but they do appreciate the better movies like we do. Yeah. But I think a lot of the older stuff, it's hard for the kids to watch just because they look dated.
I never thought of that like that, but I guess that makes sense.
So my last question to you, Chelsea, and then we will call this a night. And I love this. And I think now I'm going to have to tell Brianna, I'm going to have to split up my time between her and you now because we get along so well.
You really want to have a trip, you bring both of us on.
Man, if it goes,
be too much.
If it's anything like when Brianna and Amanda were on with me and it was the 3 of us, we'll have to see. Although that would be fun because I have a ton of questions I could ask the 2 of you just based off of being twins. But here's my question, my last final Star Wars question for you. Mm-hmm. If you were to recommend to somebody right now that has never seen Star Wars, what order, this is important, what order are you suggesting to them to watch the movies?
Do I have to include them all?
Yeah, because they're going to have to see it once.
Do they? So I'm honestly, and this is because I care so much about certain characters like Vader, I'd say see it in order. When I can choose, I remove one. Just don't watch it at all because I don't want you to start at 1. And I'm actually comfortable having people start at 2.
So, okay. The only caveat I'll put in is they have to watch, if they haven't watched anything and they're new to Star Wars, they have to watch all of them once. So what I'm saying is
I would say in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
But you realize and you understand what you give up in having them do that. You lose the Vader reveal, which I think is the biggest reveal of Star Wars.
Oh, I don't think of that. Okay, hang on. Let me give you a better answer.
I don't want to change your answer, but I'm just saying,
no.
If you watch 1 through 9 in that order, you completely lose the Vader effect in Empire Strikes Back that he's the father.
Oh yeah, no, that would ruin a lot.
And some other things maybe.
Yeah, then I think I'll do like what is the classic I've seen the order that they recommend online. It's like 4, 5, 2, 3, 6 or something. I think I may do the classic, like 4 or like 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then if you have to watch 1 later, be my guest. But like after the Vader being the father reveal is over, but before 6, I forget exactly. Watch 2, 3. Definitely watch 2, 3 before 6, in my opinion.
Okay. So I know
4, 5, 2, 3, 6. Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'll just go off of what you were saying there. And I know some people said, okay, yeah, you can watch it as a couple from this trilogy, go back to this one here, go. I keep it kind of simple, but for me, just to make sure that the Vader reveal is always there, I would just tell people 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and how we saw it in real life.
Yeah.
But I can totally get on board with what you were saying, to where if you want to nerd and geek out to where you can do, like you were saying, 4, 5. I forget the numbers that you said, but
5. It has to be 4, 5, because I think there's too much reveal in 5. So it has to be 4, 5. And then if you want 1, great. So if you're not cutting 1 at all from the story, fine. So 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
That'll be my definitive. And I actually hate that I even started with 1, because 4 is my favorite. And I'm like, how dare I introduce them to the universe with 1? So I take it all back. It's late for me. I had a momentary lapse.
This is why there is probably endless content regarding Star Wars. And I hope going forward, there will be more content that will be great content that we could always talk about and share with our grandkids and their kids. Maybe you've given me a little bit of hope, a new hope going forward, that the future Star Wars may still be healthy. I'm a little pessimistic still, so I'm like, yeah, okay, hopefully, but I'm not going to bet on it. But we'll see.
I hear that. I think it'll just get better for us. I don't know if it'll draw more viewers in.
We'll see. But this was, Chelsea, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for hanging out for an hour and 50 minutes on what was, like I told your sister, it was kind of a blind date. Did she tell you that I was like asking her about you? I was like, okay, what's her personality like? Does she have a sense of humor? Can I joke around with her?
Amanda nailed it. Amanda doesn't know me that well. She was like, Amanda just nailed you. Like, knew exactly who you are.
Do you know what your sister told me exactly?
Huh.
She said, I'm not going to tell you anything because it's going to be enjoyment for her to find out. Thank you guys for listening to another great episode of the Tossing Salad podcast. I'll tell you what, if you guys like that interview there, we've got a whole bunch of other ones to where we've sat down with people from behind their social media gardening accounts, just kind of getting to know them. Go back, take a listen to a few of those. There may be some people that you guys know and follow, and then there may be some that you guys have no idea who they are. I guarantee you guys are going to like them. If you get the opportunity, toss us a review on one of your podcast platforms, whichever ones you guys listen to. The Tossing Salad podcast is now on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We're working on getting our content up on YouTube and TikTok. But if you can give us a follow there, that'll help out the show. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.